An Army reservist became an accidental landlord and got taken advantage of by a squatter tenant who didn't pay rent for more than 10 months and ended up owing over $20,000 before finally being evicted. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News.
I would definitely take into consideration taking your time when vetting out different tenants. I did go through a company who I paid about $2,000 to $4,000 to vet her out, but I'll just take it on my own responsibility and just do my own research.
All right, so I have an interesting story for you today, and it's going over just this whole horrible situation that happened to this landlord down in Texas, and it had to do with a tenant who just took advantage of a person who became an accidental landlord. Now, if you're wondering, if you're watching this channel, you don't know what an accidental landlord is. Most of the people watching are landlords, but I'll explain it anyway. An accidental landlord is usually a person who buys a house and they might have to move or they might want to move. And rather than selling that property, the one that they already owned, what they end up doing is they turn it into a rental and then they move somewhere else. Okay. So in this story, the person is an Army reservist and they moved out of the city of Houston and they decided they were going to rent their property that they own there to a tenant. Right, which seems like a good way to become, a landlord to get started in real estate. I did it myself, okay? I didn't become an accidental landlord. I was very intentional with it, but I turned homes that I used to live into rental properties, okay? And like I said, it's a great way to get started. But the people sometimes when they're doing this stuff, they don't actually know or have a good clue of how to best operate these properties as a business, okay? And they make a lot of mistakes. And mistakes were made by this person here. I don't want to criticize her too much because she is the victim. She got taken advantage of. She ended up losing nearly $20,000 in rent and had a tenant up in her property for months on end who would not leave, and that sucks, right? But it's a good learning thing for future landlords, people who might want to get into the business. And maybe if she decides to continue to rent this place, she's going to definitely make different decisions than she did the first time. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button. Maybe leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. So for all the people out there who are landlords right now, did you start off through this, living in the property for a little while and then moving out, moving on to somewhere else, and then renting your former home out as your first rental property or as maybe one of your rental properties? I'm just curious if I'm the only one who did that, or, a lot of small mom and pop landlords, it seems like that's how they got started, or they have used that method before in the past. A lot of the ones I've talked to, at least. I'm just curious if anyone else on here has done that. And how did that turn out for you? I'm assuming it turned out well if you're still a landlord and you haven't experienced too many problems. But for some people, they do this and they don't run the numbers correctly, they don't know the laws, and they end up getting taken advantage of. And that's what I feel like happened here in this situation. So let's get into this article. This article is coming from abc13.com, and it says, "It never had to get to this. Judge gives access to home owned by Army reservists sieged by a squatter." And, she's not just a regular squatter. She actually was a tenant, in the past. So I call her a squatter tenant. Like I want to differentiate between somebody who's a squatter who never had a lease, never lived in the property legally, and a tenant who had a lease at one point in time, but hasn't paid rent and is living in there basically for free. Right now, they're both squatters, but I want to say, okay, one is a regular squatter, one is a squatter tenant. But anyway, let's get into the story. 1 week after ABC 13's report, a young Army reservist lieutenant will be given her house back after a squatter took it over. In court on Monday, a judge ruled Natasha Timmons can no longer legally live in the townhome owned by Army reservist Micaiah Barber. ABC 13 first met Barber last week when the young officer flew in from West Palm Beach, Florida, where she is currently deployed to plead her case before a judge. Barber had rented her townhome to Timmons after she was deployed, but court documents show Timmons stopped paying rent after 2 months. So basically, it sounds like she lived in Houston, Texas, right? She was deployed over to West Palm Beach, Florida, decided that she was going to rent this place out to a tenant while she was gone. And, the tenant paid rent for the first 2 months and then just stopped. So yeah, here she is. She's out of state, small, accidental landlord, and she's having to deal with a bad tenant who is not paying rent. Now, I mean that's a bad situation to be put in. But this is also why I suggest if you're going to be a out of state landlord, you need boots on the ground in the place where you are investing. And most of the time that's going to come in the form of a property manager. And the reason I say that is because the property manager will be able to just immediately file the correct paperwork, etc., for any sort of evictions. If the place does become empty, they'll be able to get it rented out a lot faster than you will trying to do it from Florida. Okay. And it sounds like you're busy with your job and everything going on in Florida. You don't want to have to deal with a tenant who like this is causing these sort of problems. That's why I have property management in my out of state properties. Okay. So yeah, I mean that would have been my suggestion to her. And especially, as a small mom and pop landlord, it just is very, very difficult to manage something that is so far away. Okay. If you are right there in the city with them, yeah, go for it. Do it yourself. It's not that hard. But yeah, when you're 1,000 miles away, it just isn't going to be very easy. Okay. There has been no payment in the past 10 months by Timmons. Initially, Barber tried to set up payment plans to work the situation out. Eventually, she went to court. However, records show Timmons, who has a theft conviction from 2003, filed two bankruptcies while living in Barber's home, which delayed court proceedings. So, right there, I see some red flags. Okay. Now, people are like, keep in mind, that they say all the time, oh, you shouldn't look at these old convictions. You shouldn't look at these old convictions. She's got a 2003 theft conviction. Okay. If she was a thief in 2003, and you really think she cares if she's going to steal from the landlord? I don't know. I don't know, but I'm not going to trust her and I'm not going to rent my property to her. So a good thorough tenant screening would have caught that theft conviction, and then she would have said, hey, I'm not going to rent to this person because I don't want to take a risk that she's not going to pay me or that she's going to steal from me. Okay? That's the honest truth, even though that conviction is 20 years old. Or maybe she saw that and then she thought to herself, oh, well, maybe I'll give her a break because it's an old conviction. That was a mistake. There's a reason why a lot of landlords say, we see any criminal convictions on your record and you're not getting into our place. Okay? There's a reason why a lot of landlords do that, because no matter how old it is, it still says something about your character. And yeah, people do change. And yeah, I do believe that some people should be given a break. But in this situation, the break wasn't warranted. The other thing they said that the lady, she filed two bankruptcies while living in this person's property. Okay. So here's my question, right? You don't just suddenly just land on bankruptcy. Nobody just suddenly lands on bankruptcy. It's very, very likely that her credit was garbage. Okay. She probably had so much garbage on her credit report. Like her score was probably rock bottom and she had all these different multiple debts, etc. So what I'm really saying here, right? And this is why I said that, this can be part of this issue is bad tenant screening. Okay. That's what this really comes down to. We have a small accidental mom and pop landlord who probably only has this one property, probably has never rented a property out before, rented it without doing appropriate tenant screening, and ended up with a awful tenant. That's the true story that I'm trying to tell you right now. It isn't that the scammer, it isn't just that the scammer, was able to live in her place for 10 plus months without paying rent. The truth of the matter is that this is a story about a landlord who didn't know what they were doing and got taken advantage of. That's why I suggest everyone do thorough tenant screening. And if you see anything that is even questionable, remember there's more tenants than there are units out there right now, all throughout the US. So you don't have to take the very first person to walk up. You don't have to take somebody with bad credit. You don't have to take somebody with criminal convictions. I mean, you can find better tenants than that. And the fact that you didn't says that you did not do proper screening. Okay. So yeah, you ended up with somebody who filed two bankruptcies, while you were there, probably had, just horrible credit history, somebody who had criminal conviction for theft on their record. And then, don't be surprised when the end result is you have to evict them. It's good that you were able to evict this lady without much issue. That just comes from the fact that you live in a state like Texas where people still have property rights. But, the fact that you had to go through this situation at all it's just bad. And you made another mistake too. And they wrote it right here in the article when they said that you tried to work out a payment plan with the tenant when you should have just been filing eviction paperwork. Okay. The tenant was a scammer. You can't trust anybody, okay? And you should have just filed, gone through the procedures immediately to evict this person rather than sitting there, oh, well, maybe they can pay me back and I'll set up a payment plan. No. If you want the person to pay, the best way to get them to pay if they haven't paid already so that they don't lose their housing is file that eviction, right? That'll motivate them to, hey, I don't want to lose my housing. But if they don't have the money and they can't pay you anyway, well, you'll be able to get them up out of there as quickly as possible and get a paying tenant up in there. And instead of doing that, though, you were, trying to work out a deal, and that was just not a good idea, and it ended up biting you in the butt, which is why it took you 10 months and you lost nearly $20,000 in lost rental income. Okay. And, I feel bad. Yes, I am being very, very critical of you, right? But, I'm putting this out there, this video out there. It's a warning to other small landlords. Okay. We've all made mistakes, all of us. Those of us who have done this for a long time, we have made mistakes. It has cost us thousands of dollars. But, we try not to make those mistakes going into the future because, we learned our lesson already. And this article is a good example of a lesson that can be learned. Okay?